video, we'll discuss the identification of talent and factors that need to be taken into account. These factors make identifying talent hard, but how hard actually is it? Well, when we are spotting talent, it is very often that scouts look for main attributes such as height, physical size, and speed. Essentially, scouts look for the players that are more physically advantaged over the rest. A lot of the time, the reasons for players being physically advantaged is due to the relative age effect, which is discussed in a previous video in this playlist. In the two pictures on the screen, it is clear to see that the players, both on the left and the right, are physically advantaged over the smaller players. Consequently, scouts are more likely to pick these players up. Abbott et al. Stated in 2015 that to enable early identification of talent, many talent identification processes measure and select young athletes based on genetically driven performance determinants, with height as an example in basketball. Therefore, picking up talent when it's young means that more often than not, the bigger players will be picked up and put into talent development environments. Therefore, there are obviously problems when identifying talent, and one problem is biases, and mainly cognitive biases when we are talking about talent. Cognitive biases are a genuine deficiency or limitation in our thinking, as stated by Dvorsky. One form of cognitive bias is observational bias, and Dvorsky again states that this is when you essentially begin to notice things that you didn't notice as much before. So to explain this, if we look at this picture on the left, it is clear to see that there are players who vary in size and height. However, when identifying talent, observational bias becomes apparent and the bigger, stronger players are noticed over the smaller, weaker players. This means that they are more likely to be identified as a player who could potentially make it. As well as observational bias, there are other important biases relating to talent identification, and the first one we will discuss is confirmation bias. This bias relates to the thought that people only believe views that are similar to their own, and therefore ignore views that are different. So, as a scout, you may believe that you are right and always have been, whereas another scout, for example, may believe something completely different to you. You will refuse to believe what they are saying based on what you have seen yourself, so you could perceive them to be wrong when potentially they could actually be right. The second bias we will discuss is the bandwagon effect, and though we're often unsure of it, we very often go with the flow of people around us. If we relate this to talent identification, a group of club scouts may have the job of picking one player to keep in the system, and then move them up to the development squad. Each person in the room would have to say which player they wanted to keep, but this bias would mean that if 5 people have chosen one player, for example, you'll be more inclined to choose this player too, because the others have done, even if you did not want to pick this player from the start. A final bias to be mentioned is current moment bias, and this bias refers to how people love to experience pleasure in the current moment, but pain later on. This therefore means that choosing something that won't cause pain is going to be an easy decision. So if we were told as a scout that we had to pick one player from an under-7s match, more often than not we would pick the larger player who is physically more developed. This is because it is an easy decision to make, whereas technical, tactical, psychological and social aspects should really be taken into account. As you can see here, there are some examples of superstars that were spotted by scouts across the world. Firstly, Gareth Bale was almost sold by Spurs for being a flop for only £3 million. Bale was picked up and seen to be a future talented player, but was on the brink of leaving for his poor performances. However, players develop in a non-linear fashion, and his rise to the top has been apparent recently, with the scout who picked him up saying that he never doubted that Bale would achieve greatness. Bale didn't really have a physical advantage, so something else must have been spotted for him to be picked up. He was then kept by the club and now has become one of the world's best players. Another player who was perceived to be talented was Paul Pogba of Juventus. He used to play for Manchester United until they let him go on a free transfer. This was because he was no longer perceived to be good enough. Little did United know was that he was going to develop into one of the world's greatest midfielders. Another example is Jamie Vardy of Leicester City, who was rejected by Sheffield Wednesday when he was only young. Vardy has continued to work and train hard at the lower leagues of football, and this has led to him winning the Premier League title with Leicester City and also breaking into the England squad this year. This shows that factors other than size and height, for example, should be looked for, and this proves that observational bias does not always prove to be good in terms of talent identification. Finally, Sports Scotland discovered that, due to biases, selection policies at youth level favour individuals who are more physically mature. However, one man proved this to be wrong, and that is Lionel Messi. One of the smallest kids you had ever seen, a boy who required growth hormone treatment, is now the best player in the world due to the faith put in him as a child.